The silence in the marble foyer of the Sunwoo estate wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the air before a terminal storm. Madame Hyrie, a woman whose name once made prime ministers tremble, was not sitting on her silk-upholstered throne. Instead, she was on the floor, her ivory dress pooling around her like a fallen lily. Her fingers, trembling and cold, gripped the hands of Niayi, a woman she had ignored for a decade. "I am not asking you to love him," Hyrie whispered, her voice cracking with a desperation that bypassed pride. "I am asking you to lie for him. If the world believes you are his wife, they cannot force you to testify against him. You are the only one who can see the numbers that prove his innocence. Please, Niayi. Without you, my son is a dead man walking." Hello, family. Welcome to this channel. Drop your city in the comments section so I can send you special greetings. Now let's go deep into the story. The ink on the marriage certificate was damp, but to Niayi, it felt like searing lead. They were in a windowless room in the basement of the estate, the only place safe from the long-range microphones of the National Intelligence Service. "You don't have to do this," Kalen said, his voice deep and raspy. He hadn't moved from his position by the wall. "My mother is dramatic. She thinks she can fix the world with a wedding ring. I can find another way." Niayi looked up from the document. She didn't look at him with the swooning eyes of a girl in a drama. She looked at him with the calculating gaze of a woman who knew exactly how many zeros were in his frozen bank accounts. "There is no other way, Kalen. The shadow cabinet has blocked every legal avenue. Spousal privilege is the only shield left. If I am your wife, I can access the Lazarus ledger without the prosecution claiming I'm an accomplice. I'm doing this for the ledger, not for you." Kalen's lips thinned into a grim line. "The ledger is a death sentence if you're caught with it." "I was already dead professionally the moment your mother's car pulled up to my apartment," Niayi replied, her voice steady. She stood up, smoothing the fabric of her crimson dress. "If I'm going to be a pariah, I might as well be a legendary one. We have 48 hours before the preliminary hearing. I need every bank statement, every shell company, and every encrypted drive your father ever touched." The dynamic was set. Kalen provided the protection, Niayi provided the brains. But as they sat across from each other, the air between them was electric with a tension that had nothing to do with law. Kalen watched the way her hands moved, efficient, precise, and fearless. He had spent his life surrounded by sycophants and soldiers. He had never met a woman who looked at his empire and saw only a math problem to be solved. "We need a story," Niayi said, breaking the silence. "Where we met, why we kept it secret, why we chose now to go public. If we stumble once, the judge will see through it." "We met in Busan," Kalen said, his voice softening. 7 years ago, you were a student. I was. A man trying to be better than his father. We married in secret because I knew the Sunwoo name would ruin your career." Niayi paused. The detail was too specific. "That's a good lie," she whispered. "It's not entirely a lie," Kalen replied, finally meeting her eyes. "I did see you in Busan. I just didn't have the courage to speak to you then." The first crack in Niayi's icy exterior appeared. She looked away, focusing back on the papers. The mission was simple: save the man, destroy the syndicate, and walk away. But as the sirens of a police patrol wailed in the distance, Niayi realized that in the world of the Sunwoo, nothing was ever as simple as math. The Golden Orchid Gala was the Wolf's Den. It was the annual gathering of the city's elite, the same people currently funding the prosecution against Kalen. Madame Hyrie had insisted on this debut. If the city saw Kalen with a woman of Niayi's reputation, a woman known for her uncompromising integrity, it would sow the first seeds of doubt about his guilt. Niayi's heart hammered against her ribs as the valet opened the door of the black sedan. She felt Kalen's hand settle on the small of her back. It was a possessive gesture, meant for the cameras, but his touch was surprisingly light, almost hesitant. "Breathe," he murmured near her ear. "You are the smartest person in this room, remember that." As they entered the ballroom, the music didn't stop, but the conversation did. A sea of eyes, some curious, most hostile, turned toward them. Niayi held her head high, her blonde-streaked curls cascading over the red silk of her dress. She wasn't just a wife, she was a statement. They were immediately intercepted by Director Han, the lead prosecutor, and a secret puppet of the shadow cabinet. He was a man with a smile like a razor blade. "Kalen," Han drawled, his eyes sliding over to Yi. "I didn't know you brought guests to these events." "This is Yi Sunwoo," Kalen said, his voice echoing with a newfound authority. "My wife. She's been abroad managing our private interests. She's returned to help me clear up these misunderstandings you've created." Han's smile faltered. He knew Yi's reputation. He knew that if she was looking into the books, his fabricated evidence wouldn't hold up for long. A secret marriage? How romantic, and how very convenient for the trial. Yi stepped forward, her voice calm and melodic. "Convenience has nothing to do with it, Director. I simply grew tired of watching men who can't balance a checkbook try to audit my husband's soul. We'll see you in court on Monday." The room buzzed. The mafia boss was no longer a lone monster. He was a man with a formidable partner. But the victory was short-lived. As they moved toward the terrace, a waiter bumped into Yi, slipping a note into her hand. "The ledger isn't just about Kalen. Look at your father's final audit. The past isn't buried, it's waiting for you." Yi's blood ran cold. Her father hadn't been cast out of the family business for a mistake. He had been eliminated because he found the same thing she was looking for. The stakes had just shifted from saving Kalen to avenging her own blood. Chapter 3, Cracks in the Script. Back at the estate, the adrenaline of the gala faded, replaced by a haunting chill. Yi sat in the library, the mysterious note trembling in her fingers. Kalen entered, shedding his suit jacket. He saw her expression and was at her side in an instant. "What is it?" he asked, his voice sharp with concern. She handed him the note. As he read it, his jaw tightened. "Han is trying to rattle you. He's digging up your father's history to distract you from the trial." "What if he's not?" Yi snapped, her composure finally breaking. "My father died a broken man because he worked for your family." "What if the shadow cabinet is just a name for the people your father used to protect?" Kalen didn't flinch. He sat down across from her, leaning forward into the light. "My father was a criminal, Yi. I have spent the last 5 years of my life trying to bleed this organization dry. I've been liquidating assets, paying off victims, and closing the docks. That's why they are framing me. The politicians don't want the mafia to go away. They want a mafia they can control. My father was their partner. I am their problem." Yi looked at him, searching for a lie. She saw only a profound, soul-deep weariness. For the first time, she realized they were the same. They were both children of a legacy they never asked for, trying to find a way to be clean in a world built on filth. "I need to see the encrypted files," she said softly. "Now." They spent the night huddled over a laptop, the blue light reflecting in their eyes. As Yi cracked the first layer of encryption, she didn't find lists of drug shipments or hits. She found a digital map of the city's infrastructure and a series of payments to the very judge presiding over Kalen's case. Suddenly, the power in the estate cut out. Total darkness. "Stay down," Kalen hissed. He reached into his waistband, drawing a weapon with a fluid, practiced motion. But he didn't move away from her. He stepped in front of her, shielding her body with his own. The sound of shattering glass echoed from the foyer. They weren't waiting for the trial anymore. The shadow cabinet had decided to end the marriage before it could reach the courtroom. "Kalen," Yi whispered, her hand catching his sleeve. "I've got you," he replied, his voice a low growl of protection. "They think I'm a monster. Let's show them what a monster does when someone touches what's his." The darkness in the estate was suffocating, but Kalen moved through it like a predator born to the night. He didn't rush toward the sound of the intruders. Instead, he maneuvered Yi into a reinforced panic room hidden behind the library's false bookshelf. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice barely a breath. "If I'm not back in 10 minutes, there is a satellite phone in the floor safe. Call the number on the emergency card. It's a journalist, not a lawyer." Yi watched the heavy steel door click shut, leaving her in a silence so thick she could hear the frantic rhythm of her own heart. She sat on the floor with the laptop, the blue light of the screen illuminating her determined face. She didn't just sit and wait. Her fingers flew across the keys. If Kaylin was fighting with lead, she would fight with logic. She dug deeper into the Lazarus ledger. The files were a labyrinth of offshore accounts and shell corporations, but she began to notice a pattern, a ghost signature in the metadata. Charniayi's breath hitched. Hyrie, the matriarch wasn't just a desperate mother, she was the architect. Outside, the muffled sounds of a struggle reached her. A heavy thud, the sharp crack of a suppressed firearm, and then a chilling silence. When the door finally hissed open, Niayi stood up, bracing herself. It was Kaylin, his white shirt torn at the shoulder, a crimson smear across his cheekbone. He wasn't injured, but his eyes were dark with a cold, simmering rage. "They're gone," he said. "They weren't here to kill us. They were here for the laptop." "They failed," Niayi said, turning the screen toward him. "But Kaylin, we have a problem. Your mother didn't bring me here just to save you. She brought me here because she knew I was the only one who could bypass the encryption she created. She's not the victim in this story. She's the one holding the leash on the shadow cabinet." The revelation hung between them. Kaylin looked at the screen, then at the door where his mother was likely sleeping, or waiting. The woman who had knelt at Niayi's feet was the same woman who had built the very system that was now trying to devour her son. "She's playing both sides," Kaylin whispered, the realization shattering the last of his familial loyalty. "She's using our marriage as a distraction while she negotiates a new deal with Han." Niayi stepped closer to him, her fear replaced by a cold, calculating fire. "Then we change the game. We don't just clear your name, Kaylin. We dismantle the throne she's sitting on." The next morning, the estate felt like a gilded cage. Madame Hyrie joined them for breakfast, looking every bit the elegant, grieving widow in her ivory silk. She poured tea for Niayi with a steady hand, her smile hitting her eyes with a warmth that Niayi now knew was a calculated lie. "I heard there was a disturbance last night," Hyrie said smoothly. "I hope you are both unharmed. It only proves how vital our union is. The world is coming for us." Niayi took a sip of the tea, her expression a mask of professional calm. "Actually, madam, the disturbance helped me find something. A series of transactions linked to the construction of the new city district. Transactions that bear a very specific digital thumbprint." Hyrie's hand paused for a fraction of a second. "Is that so? Technology is a fickle thing, often easily forged." "Not this," Niayi countered, leaning forward. "This is a masterpiece of accounting. It's the kind of work my father used to admire. It's also the work that got him blacklisted when he refused to sign off on it." The air in the room turned arctic. Kaylin watched the exchange, his body tense. He realized that Niayi wasn't just performing for a trial anymore, she was conducting an interrogation. "Your father was a stubborn man, Niayi," Hyrie said, her voice dropping an octave. "Stubborn men often find themselves alone. I gave you a chance to be part of a family, to have power. Don't waste it on the ghost of a man who didn't understand how the world works." "I understand exactly how the world works," Niayi replied. "It works on leverage, and right now I have the ledger. Kaylin and I are going to the prosecutor's office this afternoon, but we aren't going to see Han. We're going to the Internal Affairs Division." Hyrie laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "You think Kaylin will let you destroy his legacy? He is a Sunwoo." Kaylin stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the marble. "That's where you're wrong, Mother. I'm the man who's going to make sure the Sunwoo name is never spoken again." As they walked out, Niayi felt a strange sense of vertigo. She was no longer just an accountant or a fake wife. She was the pivot point upon which the entire underworld of the city was turning. She looked at Kaylin as they reached the car, and for the first time, she saw not a boss, but a partner. They didn't go to Internal Affairs. Instead, Kaylin drove them to a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a place that didn't appear on any of the Sunwoo asset lists. Inside, the walls were covered in monitors and maps. This was Kaylin's true base of operations, the heart of his 5-year plan to dissolve the syndicate. "If we release the ledger now," Kaylin said, packing the room, "the shadow cabinet will trigger a scorched earth protocol. They'll liquidate the city's pension funds and flee. Thousands of innocent people will lose everything." Nia Yi looked at the data flowing across the monitors. Then we don't just release it, we intercept the liquidation. We use the marriage to gain access to the joint marital accounts the law forced you to create when we signed that certificate. Since I am your legal spouse, my signature is the key B to your key A. It was a brilliant, dangerous gamble. By merging their legal identities, they could move the syndicate's wealth into a protected trust before the politicians could touch it. But it meant Nia Yi would have to sign her name to every single transaction, linking her forever to the Sunwoo history. If this goes wrong, Kaylin said, standing in front of her, you won't just be blacklisted, you'll be a fugitive. I've spent my life cleaning up other people's messes, Nia Yi said, looking up at him. For once, I want to be the one who decides where the dirt goes. The tension between them snapped. It wasn't a moment of romance, but of profound, shared purpose. Kaylin reached out, his hand hovering near her face before he finally tucked a strand of blonde-streaked hair behind her ear. Why are you doing this, Nia Yi? Really? Because you were the only one who saw me, she whispered. All those years ago in Busan. You didn't just fund my school, you sent me the books my father loved. You knew who I was before I even knew myself. Kaylin's expression softened, the mafia boss mask crumbling completely. Before he could speak, the monitors in the room began to flash red. A breach. They found us, Kaylin said, his voice instantly returning to its command tone. It's not the police. It's my mother's personal security. She's not negotiating anymore. The warehouse doors groaned under the pressure of a battering ram. Nia Yi turned to the main terminal, her heart racing. I need 3 minutes, Kaylin. Just 3 minutes to finalize the transfer. You have two, Kaylin said, drawing 2 handguns and checking the magazines. He stepped toward the entrance, a lone silhouette against the coming storm. Don't look back, Nia Yi, just keep typing. The air in the warehouse was thick with the smell of ozone and the rhythmic, deafening thud of boots against the corrugated steel exterior. Inside, Nia Yi was no longer just an accountant. She was a digital architect, her eyes reflecting the cascading green and white code of the Sunwoo's financial heart. Transferring, 68%, 72%, she whispered, her voice a steady anchor in the chaos. Behind her, Kaylin stood like a sentinel. He wasn't firing wildly. He was a man of precision. He used the warehouse's internal security system to trigger localized fire suppressants, creating a thick fog that confused the incoming attackers. This wasn't a gang war. It was a tactical delay. Every second he bought was $1 million moved from a criminal ledger into a public trust. Kaylin, the encryption is shifting, Nia Yi shouted over the hiss of the sprinklers. It's a dead man's switch. Your mother. She didn't just build the ledger, she tied it to the city's power grid. If I force the transfer, the hospital district goes dark. Kaylin moved to her side, his gaze locking onto the screen. This was the moral trap. Madame Hyrie was betting that their heroism would make them hesitate. She expected them to choose the city over their own victory. She's holding the city hostage, Kaylin hissed. Nia Yi, look at the subnodes. Is there a bypass? Nia Yi's mind raced through thousands of pages of her father's old journals. He had once written about the ghost in the machine, a hidden backdoor in the national accounting software used by the elite. There's a way, she said, her fingers blurring across the keys. But I have to authenticate it using my father's old credentials. If I do this, it will prove he was in the system. It might tarnish his name forever. Kaylin placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch grounding her. Your father didn't want a clean name, he wanted a clean city. He left you those credentials because he knew this day would come. He didn't fail, Nia Yi. He was just waiting for his partner to arrive. Nia Yi took a breath and entered the final code, a DSUWA, her father's middle name. The screen turned a brilliant, steady blue. The transfer hit 100%. The shadow cabinet was bankrupt. The hospital lights stayed on, but the offshore accounts of the city's most corrupt men vanished into a foundation titled the Merit Initiative. The doors to the terminal room finally burst open, but it wasn't the tactical team. It was the silence of a defeated empire. The attackers had received the notification. Their paychecks no longer existed. Over the weekend, Nia had leaked the Lazarus ledger not to the police, but to every major news outlet simultaneously, with one crucial addition: the list of politicians who had received security fees from the Sunwoo estate. Nia walked up the courthouse steps, her hand firmly entwined with Kaylin. She wore a tailored suit of ivory, a direct defiance of Hyori's signature color. She wasn't the mafia wife anymore, she was the whistleblower. Inside the courtroom, Director Han looked like a man who had seen his own ghost. His evidence was gone, replaced by a mountain of digital proof that he was on the Sunwoo payroll. The prosecution wishes to withdraw all charges, Han stammered, his face a sickly shade of gray. Withdraw, the judge, who was also on the list, looked equally terrified. On what grounds? Nia stood up, her voice ringing through the hallowed hall. On the grounds that the Sunwoo Syndicate no longer exists. Every asset has been legally transferred to a non-profit foundation dedicated to rebuilding the neighborhoods destroyed by the very men in this room. My husband, Kaylin, is not a boss of a crime family. He is the first witness for the state. The courtroom erupted. In the back row, Madame Hyori sat alone. She didn't scream or cry. She simply watched Nia with a look of begrudging respect. She had been outplayed by the one thing she never factored into her equations: a woman who couldn't be bought and a son who couldn't be broken. As they were ushered out through a private exit, Kaylin stopped in the shadow of the great stone pillars. He looked at Nia, really looked at her, without the weight of the contract between them. It's over, he said softly. The marriage certificate, it served its purpose. I'll have the annulment papers drawn up today. You're free, Nia. You can go back to your life. You're a hero. Nia looked at the bustling city below. For the first time in years, the numbers in her head didn't feel like a burden. My life was empty before this, Kaylin. I spent years auditing the past. I think I'd like to start auditing a future instead. 6 months later, the Sunwoo estate had been converted into the Adesua Center for Economic Justice. The marble floors that once felt cold and oppressive were now covered in the vibrant rugs of a community hub. Nia stood on the terrace, watching the sunset over the skyline. She wasn't wearing a crimson dress or an ivory suit. She wore a simple, elegant blouse and a smile that finally reached her eyes. Kaylin walked out to join her. He had traded his dark suits for light linens. He spent his days working with a foundation, ensuring the transition of the city's resources was transparent and fair. He was no longer a man in the shadows. He was a man in the light. The board approved the new scholarship names, Kaylin said, handing her a folder. Your father's name is at the top of the list. Nia took the folder, her fingers brushing against his. The electricity was still there, but the tension had transformed into something steady and profound. We did it, she whispered. No, Kaylin corrected, turning to face her. You did it. I just provided the distraction. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. This wasn't a tactical move. There were no cameras, no lawyers, and no mothers pleading for salvation. The first time we signed that paper, it was to save my life, Kaylin said, his voice thick with emotion. I'd like to sign a new one that has nothing to do with the law and everything to do with how I feel when I see you walk into a room. Nia, will you stay? Not as a Sunwoo and not as a partner in a ruse, but as yourself. Nia didn't need to check the numbers or audit the risks. She looked at the man who had become her equal in every sense of the word. She took the ring, but more importantly, she took his hand. I'm not going anywhere, she replied. The story ends not with a gunshot or a crown, but with two people standing against the horizon, having turned a legacy of crime into a